I was not happy as a child, although from time to time I was content. I live in books more than I live anywhere else. And I believe that quote makes me finish these books as quickly as possible. So this book, called The Ocean at the End of the Lane, is a new book from Neil Gaiman. Basically, have you ever looked back at your childhood moment and then wondering, did those memories really happening? How those memories became true the way you remember them? This book starts by a middle-aged man who comes to his childhood home for a funeral, but then he ends up visiting his old friend's house called Lady Hemstock. But turns out he couldn't find her. He only found her mother and her grandmother. So basically he just started sitting beside the pond, but the way he remembers is not just a pond, it's actually an ocean. And then the story start the journey from there. Basically, this book's really uncover about a child who are recovering from loneliness trauma and her father's abusing trauma. Sometimes it's a good reference, but other than that, it's about makes you thinking like what childhood trauma that makes you become an adult like this. And as a young adult myself, I feel like throughout these books, I kept thinking, what are the childhood trauma I've had that I've been having with my father? And the central of this is basically the main issues is with his father. Typical. So, and I kept thinking like, what are those trauma even that makes me became like this? And it's actually a very good book because it kept you thinking that all of your decision that makes you become a person like this are starting since a young child. Like typical Neil Gaiman, the story evolving about a dark magic that Lady Hemstock, his friend, are having. And when he's having a first murder in his house, he's starting to have a dark events that like there are some bad dreams and then monster that trying to get him. But since his friend Lady Hemstocks are studying about dark magic, the story are uncovering about the friendship between them and about how both of them are trying to fight the monster. There are actually funny pages when he asks Letty, like the way Letty behave is not like a kid. Well, the story itself, it's actually from the POV of a kid. But since his friends are not behaving like a kid, he asks Letty, how old are you, really? And then Letty said 11. And then he asks again, how long have you been 11 for? Which is actually funny. So basically, his friends are not an 11 years old. She's a more older than she looks, but she's in the body of 11 years old, trying to fight the monster and trying to fight some dark magic, which is like the central story and the premise of this book. Well, I understand that Neil Gaiman definitely has a dark childhood trauma because the story, this man, our main character, are having a childhood trauma abusing from his father. And he's saying his father are cheating with his nanny, with other women, and keep seeing her as a monster, which in fiction it doesn't make sense, but since he's a young kid like 10 years old, it makes sense how he seeing that his father cheating with a monster. So it feels like a kid's books. It really feels like that, but the books are meant to be read by an adult. When we remembering our childhood memories, it feels like we remember it as a fiction style, but since we growing up into an older person and a wiser person, we remember it as a different font. We remember it as a different memories that is not the fact. And I love how this book's really how this book's discussing about that, because at the end of the books and through the story of the books, it's gonna make you thinking, is it really happening, or is just a fantasy that you've had? It's how our main character, this man, trying to uncover his childhood trauma through memories that he had, which I think that is a beautiful way to a self-help, to how you starting the journey of trying to having a peace with yourself, and with an extraordinary style of way of storytelling. Well, I think that the writing style is very simple, since I've told you that this book was meant to be an adult, but it's actually a kid's book, but it's meant to be adult. So it's basically simple, but in a poetic way. It feels, even though the story is about he's being chased by a dark monster, by a frightening being, there are some parts that give you warmth about his childhood memories, about him losing his cats when he was kids, and it's full of symbolism. That is what I love. It's full of symbolism about how he uncover his childhood trauma when he's already an adult. And it's a very atmospheric book, since we already know Neil Gaiman books like American Gods, like Neverwhere and Anansi Boys. He likes to talk about monster and dark magic style, but this book is different. This is one of the books that Neil Gaiman wrote. Well, this is actually one of the kids' books, like Sandman, but it's more a simple way. It has a lot of symbolism about how we see our childhood trauma. For a conclusion, since it's not a very big book, it's only 250 pages, I've read this book for like a day, because it's a very fast-paced story. And so for the conclusion, to me, The Ocean of the End of the Land is much more than a fantasy novel. It's a story about childhood and about the fears that we couldn't explain, the memories we slowly lost, and invisible scars that shape who we became as coming from the perspective of a middle-aged man. And Neil Gaiman reminds us that children often experience the world very differently from adults. What adults dismiss as an imagination may be deeply real to a child. From the childhood trauma that the man has suffered since he was a kid, the abusing father, I believe that is the core memory from this kid. And since I have a pretty similar story, I have a pretty similar story with the character in here, I think that it's helpful to me to remember the story as it was, rather than imagination as a child. So, and sometimes these books also taught you that the greatest acts of courage happen when no one else is watching. I really love that, because it feels like a kid's book, it taught you about how to become a brave man, how to become a brave person, but it's meant to be to read by an adult person. And I believe what makes this novel so memorable is not about the magic or the monster. So if you want to read the books because of the monster, don't read this book. don't because the monster is not very memorable. It's not a very good action story too, but the emotions hidden beneath them. Every supernatural event feels like a reflection of something deeply human. It's the emotion that the kid feels, like such as fear and loneliness and the grief. Oh my god, I love this book so much. I think that it's one of the rare books that becomes more meaningful the longer you think about it, because even I finished this book in one day, it's still in my head until now. It kept you thinking like a few weeks after you read it. So if you're looking for a fantasy action books, it's not the books you're looking for. But if you enjoy atmospheric stories that touching heart, this book is for you. For me, it's an easy 5 out of 5 stars. And since I've already read Neverwhere, American Gods, books by Neil Gaiman, I think this is one of my favorite books by him. And I believe that's all from me. I want to thank you.